Okay, so welcome everyone for being here tonight. I have been looking forward to this conversation for a long time because although I've been working in the field of holistic health for 20 years now, I don't think I've ever taught a workshop quite like this one. Not because necessarily my work has changed, but because over the years, something has become clearer and clearer to me. Women often come to me because they want to lose weight or improve their digestion or finally understand what's happening during perimenopause and menopause. And those concerns are real, they're important. And over the years, I've realized those aren't always the deepest reason they're sitting across from me. Somewhere along the way, they had become disconnected from their own body. Not intentionally, of course, not because they didn't care, but because life had asked too much of them for too long. They had been, they had learned to keep going instead of listening. They had learned to walk alongside their body rather than truly living in it. And perhaps that's one of the reasons this work matters so deeply to me. Because if I'm honest, there was a time when I felt that way too. I had gained weight, my digestion had become unpredictable, I no longer recognized myself. And like many women, I believed I simply needed more discipline, more willpower, or that I just hadn't found the right solution yet, the right diet, the right program. Then something happened. I encountered Ayurveda. And I thought I was going to learn about food. I had no idea that what I was really about to learn was a completely different way of seeing and understanding myself. Since then, I've had the privilege of walking alongside hundreds of women, not simply as they improved their health, but also as they learned to build a different relationship with their bodies. And I realized that perhaps the greatest challenge of midlife, but of any important transitional point in a woman's life, isn't simply managing symptoms. Perhaps it's finding our way back into a relationship with the body that has been carrying us all along. Today, you'll probably not leave with all the answers, but my hope is that you'll leave asking different questions. Because sometimes, as I have come to realize, the quality of our lives changes, when the quality of our questions changes. Have you ever looked at your body and asked, what happened? The weight keeps going up. Sometimes the shape of your body changes so much that you no longer recognize yourself in your favorite clothes. Your digestion has become so unpredictable that you turn down invitations to go out. You choose your outfit based on whether it will hide your stomach. Perhaps you even started avoiding intimacy because you no longer feel at home in your own body. You're exhausted even after a full night's sleep. A good one. You forget why you walked into a room. Or you're at a grocery store and you feel like putting your whole body into the refrigerated section just to cool off. Your emotions feel closer to the surface, things that used to not bother you just get you flustered and overwhelmed. And then you find yourself reacting in ways that don't even really feel like you. Or you want to say no, but you don't always know how. And somewhere inside, a thought begins to take hold. My body is betraying me. I've heard those exact words from women over and over again. Maybe you said them too. And if you have, I want you to know something before we get any further. If that's how you feel, it makes perfect sense that you would. Please don't get into self-judgment for thinking that way. But today, I'd like to invite you to consider a question. Because this one question changed my life. What if your body isn't betraying you? Ha ha ha. So, before we can honestly explore that question, I think we first need to examine an assumption, one that many of us have carried for years. And when I mean years, I mean 30, 40, 50, maybe even 60 years without realizing it. Because if you've ever found yourself saying, my body is betraying me, I don't think you've arrived at that conclusion by yourself or even overnight. I think that little by little, you learned to see yourself that way. Think about it. When something isn't working, what's our first instinct? To push harder, to become more disciplined, to eat less, to exercise more, to try another program, another supplement, another diet, another plan. As if the answer is always to do more. And I don't think that's an accident. I think that's a behavior many of us have spent a lifetime learning. As women, we've been praised for putting everyone else first, for saying yes, for being dependable, for caring more than our share, for pushing through exhaustion, for taking care of everyone else before taking care of ourselves. We've been taught that resting is something we earn, that slowing down is laziness, that saying no is selfish, that asking for help is weak. And perhaps most of all, we've been taught that if something isn't working, the answer is to try harder. Am I right or am I right? So when our bodies begin changing, our first instinct isn't curiosity, it's control. If I were just more disciplined, if I had more willpower, if I could just get myself back on track. Sounds familiar? Yeah. I often think of it like stretching a rubber band. At first it stretches, then it stretches a little more. I wish I had a rubber band right now. Next time I'll have one. And because it doesn't snap, we assume it's fine. So we keep pulling harder, longer, believing that if we just apply a little more force, everything will go back the way it was until one day it snaps. Well, the rubber band snaps not because it's weak, but because it has been under tension for too long. I wonder if many of us have treated ourselves the same way. Hint, hint. Believing that being harder on ourselves is what keeps us motivated. I mean, where does that come from? That criticizing ourselves and judging ourselves is what keeps us from giving up. That if we stop pushing, everything will fall apart. And yet, how many of us have discovered that the harder we become on ourselves, the further away we feel from ourselves? Change is challenging. I say it all the time, but not because we're lazy and we lack willpower and discipline, but because our habits, our beliefs, and even the ways we've learned to survive have often served a purpose. They've helped us become who we are today. They've helped us raise children, build careers, care for aging parents. Yeah, I'm talking about you. Meet impossible deadlines, keep going through difficult seasons. We shouldn't get upset about our attachment to them or our attachments to our habits, our old habits, because they once protected us. So before we ask whether the body is betraying us, perhaps there's another possibility worth considering. Maybe the body isn't the first thing we need to question. Maybe it's the stories we've been telling ourselves, the beliefs we've inherited, the behaviors we've inherited of pushing harder, the ideas we've been conditioned to accept without ever stopping to ask whether they're true. And if the lens through which we see ourselves is distorted, maybe everything we see through that lens is distorted too. Now, I think we're ready to come back to that question and begin to unpack it together. What if your body isn't betraying you? For just a few minutes, I'd like to invite you to look at your body. I mean, if you have a mirror in front of you, great. If you don't, just scan your body. But look at it through a different lens. A lens that completely changed the way I came to understand my own body. One that invites you and us to ask a very different question. Not how do I stop what's happening, but what if my body has been responding to something all along? Because if that's true, everything begins to look different. Think about it for a moment. When you don't sleep enough, your body adapts. Somehow you still find a way to wake up the next morning and do what needs to be done, right? When you're under chronic stress, your body adapts. It mobilizes the energy you need to keep going, even when every part of you longs to rest. When life asks you to care for everyone else before yourself, your body adapts. It helps you keep giving, even when your own reserves are running low. When you keep going, even though you're exhausted, your body adapts again and again and again. Different way of looking at it, right? Because that's what the body does. It responds, it adapts, and sometimes, in order to keep functioning, it will compensate. It finds ways to keep you moving, to keep you functioning, to help you meet the demands of your life. And often it does that so well that we don't even realize how much it's been caring until one day the body can no longer meet the same demands in quite the same way. And that's often when women begin to think, my body is betraying me. So, in the particular case of perimenopause and menopause, of course, hormones change. That is real. But I don't believe the hormones are the whole story. I believe, for example, menopause often shines a light on a story that has been quietly unfolding for years, and even after menopause, if we haven't really looked at that story. We might still experiencing some symptoms that are shining a light on a story that has been quietly unfolding for years, a story of adaptation, of resilience, sometimes of compensation, of caring more than was ever meant to be carried alone. Can you begin to see the pattern? Yeah. Your body has been responding to your life for years. So earlier, I told you that when I first encountered Ayurveda, I thought I was going to learn about food, spices and herbs and things like that. And I did. But over time, I realized the greatest gift Ayurveda gave me wasn't information. It taught me how to listen differently, how to look differently at myself, my body, my habits, my reactions, at the stories I have been telling myself for years. And little by little, I found myself asking different questions. So instead of asking, how do I get rid of this symptom, I began asking, what might this thing be trying to tell me? Instead of asking or saying, what's wrong with me? I began asking, what might I not understand yet? And over time, I realized that Ayurveda had become much more than a 1,000-year-old system of health. It had become a way of listening, a way of understanding. I will go as far as saying a way of being loyal to myself. And that changed everything. So I'll give you an example. It's a funny example. And if you've worked with me, I probably share that example with you because it was quite transformational for me. Since I was a very young girl, I believed that there was something wrong with me. Whenever I felt like I was disrespected, or I felt like, um, something felt it was profoundly unfair, or someone was unfair towards me, my first reaction immediately was anger. And then afterwards, especially, as a young adult, I would judge myself for it. And I wished I reacted differently, less emotionally, how we're being told we're too emotional. Yeah. So I thought, why can't I just let things go? Then Ayurveda invited me to look at the same experience through a different lens. It didn't tell me that anger was good or it was bad. No, it simply asked me to be become curious. What if this reaction wasn't only something to judge? What if it was also revealing something about my nature and the way I respond to certain situations? Because that same fire that made me react so strongly was also connected to my ability to see clearly, to discern, recognize injustice and lack of authenticity, and to fight for what I thought was right. Sometimes even disregarding danger. So nothing about my, reaction, my fiery reaction changed overnight, but everything about the way I understood it and the way I looked at myself did. Because I understood myself differently and I started looking at myself differently. And because of that, I stopped fighting myself. That's when I began wondering if changing the way I understood my anger, that part of my character, could change my relationship with myself. Could the same thing be true of my body? Could fatigue be more than fatigue? Could digestive issues be more than digestive issues? And that's why, taking what you call them now. I don't even remember what you take in the US. I'm so used to what they're taking here in France. The pink stuff is not really, working, is not really doing the trick because could digestive issues be more than digestive issues? Could weight gain be more than weight gain? Could hot flashes be more than hot flashes? And not because they aren't real and not because they don't deserve relief. Let me be clear. You deserve relief. But because perhaps they are also telling a story. A story I had never learned how to read. We never learned how to read. And slowly, my conversations with my body begin to change. Instead of asking, how do I make you stop? I began asking, what are you trying to show me? And that's when, slowly, over the years, I realized something. For years, my body had been responding to the life I was living. And perhaps healing isn't about continually asking my body to adapt to whatever life asks of it. Perhaps it also means learning to ask, what does this body need now? And little by little, allowing my choices to respond to that understanding. And at the end of the day, 20 years in this field of holistic health, 14 practicing Ayurveda, I think that's one of the greatest gifts that Ayurveda has ever given me. A different relationship with myself. And that's what I am trying to and wanting to share and convey with the women I have the privilege of working with. So, let's do a little exercise. I'd like to invite you to think of one symptom, just one. I'm pretty sure we can come up with a bunch of them. One that's been particularly frustrating lately. So perhaps it's fatigue, perhaps it's waking up at 2 a.m., perhaps it's bloating, hot flashes, anxiety, brain fog, or the number on the scale. Don't necessarily choose the biggest one, right? But choose the one that comes to your mind first. Okay. And you may want, a pen, a piece of paper if you're someone who likes to write things down. That might be really interesting. So when this symptom appears, what do you automatically tell yourself? There are no right or wrong answers. Just notice whatever came to your mind first. Maybe it's a whole bunch of things that come to your mind, not just one thing. So perhaps you thought, my body's failing, I'm getting old. Perhaps you even thought, I'm lazy, or I'll never lose this weight, I'm broken. Notice the kind of thoughts that come to you when you think about your body. Okay. Okay. So for the next 1 or 2 minutes, I'd like for you to imagine that you're placing that story you're telling yourself right now that first came, about your body. You put it beside you. You don't need to throw it away. Don't don't decide it's wrong. Just put it aside for a couple of minutes. And now I'd like you to look at that symptom again as if you were seeing it for the first time. And just observe it without trying to solve anything, without trying to fix anything. Simply notice. And also notice what happens in your body when you stop calling that symptom your enemy, the problem, the issue. Okay? Okay? As if you were seeing it for the first time. No judgment, observation. Then ask yourself, if this symptom weren't evidence that something is wrong with me, what else might it be asking me to notice? And observe what you're noticing. Observe what comes up for you. Again, if you like to write things down, you can write it down, or just simply be in a state of a detached observer. So I'm curious, what happened? I'd love to share, I'd love for you to share in one word, perhaps, what happened in the chat. Or, you can take your mic off, you can put your mic on and share if you feel so inclined to do so. A letting down, a feeling of tiredness. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. So you also perhaps noticed for the first time the difference between observing yourself and judging yourself. Yeah. In Ayurveda, one of the greatest tools we can cultivate, and in yoga, is the attitude of an observer towards ourselves, towards the world, definitely, and towards ourselves. Not a judge, an observer. Because an observer doesn't rush to conclusions. An observer becomes curious. An observer asks, what am I noticing? Before asking, how do I fix it? What am I noticing? How do I fix it? Very different energy, right? Because sometimes what I've come to realize is that the greatest change doesn't begin with finding the right answer. It begins by asking the right question. I feel like a Buddhist Zen monk when I say this, But it's true. I've come to find out that it's true. Thanks to the wonderful people, the wonderful women, and some of the men I've had the honor to work with. And they've questioned me, and they challenged me to really, because I really want to help to go deeper and deeper. So, of course, what we've done today may seem simple. We've changed the question. But when the question changes, the direction of our investigation changes. And that's why it's so profound and fundamental. So again, instead of beginning with how do I make this stop? How do I fix it? We begin asking, or at least we can, what is happening in this body? What might I not understand yet? What does this body need now? And those questions may lead us towards different answers. It's worth saying it again. Perhaps healing isn't about asking your body to keep adapting to your life. Perhaps healing begins when your life, little by little, begins adapting to the changing needs of your body. And the needs of our bodies do change. So what does that mean? That means that when your choices become more aligned, your pace becomes more aligned, your boundaries become more aligned, the way you nourish yourself becomes more aligned, the way you speak to yourself or about yourself becomes more aligned. Not through fear, not through force, but through understanding. Our bodies are not asking us to become perfect. They're inviting us into a different relationship. A relationship built on curiosity instead of judgment, understanding instead of fear, alignment instead of control. And something beautiful begins to happen little by little, because everything happens little by little. It's not bam, and everything makes sense, and the skies open up and the angels are playing the clarinet and saying, ba 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 ba. No, everything happens little by little. So little by little, you begin recognizing yourself, not necessarily the woman you used to be, 20 years ago or 50 years ago. Life has changed, you have changed, but perhaps you begin discovering someone you've lost along the way, someone who trusts herself, someone who no longer measures her worth by how much she can endure or how much she can produce or how much she can criticize herself and beat herself up, but someone who knows that caring for herself isn't selfish, it's wise. Someone who begins to feel at home in herself again. Not simply managing symptoms, but finding our way back to ourselves. Yeah. If there's one thing I hope you take away from today, it's this. Your body isn't asking you to become someone else. It's inviting you to come home to yourself.